Where there is beauty, there is ugliness. When something is right, something else is wrong. Knowledge and ignorance depend on each other. It has been like that since the beginning. How could it be otherwise? Wanting to toss out one and hold on to the other makes for a ridiculous comedy. You must still deal with everything ever-changing, even when you say it's wonderful. That was Ryokan, one of my favorite Zen hermit poets. More on that later. But I wanted to say good evening to everyone. And I understand we're not mic'd, so I have to project, which I'm not very good at. I'm glad I had a throat licensure beforehand. As Sensei Ryodo always says, welcome bodhisattvas. And I love that. A person who has taken a vow to help all beings awaken. To what? The interconnectedness of life. And then in the Zen Peacemaker order, it's commonly used for those to refer to those who unselfishly serve others. And another thank you. I stole this line from Roshi. Thank you for the gift of your presence. I've used that ever since I heard her say that to a cancer group at UCLA some time ago. And I use it every month at the California Men's Colony, where we do a memorial service. And we're surrounded with inmates. And I thank them for the gift of their presence. Of course, most of them aren't acquainted with the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. Here we are, the end of the third full day of Sesshin. How you all doing? A lot of tired faces out there. How's your oryoki? Quiet? I wondered, I feel like I've been hit by a refrigerated Mack truck. And I wondered why that was the case. This is only Monday. But then it dawned on me, we usually begin, a lot of the sessions begin on a Sunday, and Wednesday is what I consider the hump day, when things are just falling apart, sore knees, sore back, things just aren't going right. Well, this is kind of the third day. So I guess it's in keeping with the way it usually is. So I'm sure it's smooth sailing from here on out, right? Right through Saturday. And I wanted to thank everyone. I know Roshi did last night, but I wanted to throw out my thanks as well for everybody that's involved here, creating this wonderful container. And I thought about Roshi's talk last night. In a sense, we're all kind of leave takers, at least for a week. Most of us have left families, spouses, partners at home, left our jobs, and come together to create this container. And we're all one body. A lot of different individual parts, a lot of different personalities, separate, individual, unique, yet all part of this Ruwatsu body. And this has been in the works for a long time. Of course, the Ruwatsu tradition goes back centuries. ZCLA goes back to 1967. But this Ruwatsu started, over a year ago, getting it on the calendar initially. And it's been nurtured ever since. And here we are. And this is a particularly auspicious day, Bodhi Day, where we commemorate Buddha's awakening. And it's amazing to think we are the lineage holders, the current holders of this tradition that goes back over 2,500 years. And here we are. Anyone see the morning star this morning? I did. Anybody else? Yes. And that was kind of amazing and wonderful, because heretofore, the first few days, it had been so cloudy we couldn't see it. And here on Bodhi Day, the star is out. We were stuck with the hazy moon of enlightenment before that. Of course, I nearly put my eye out looking for it. I had seen it earlier, and then walking that Kinhin path by the Kanzeon, close to the driveway, there was a little branch, got me in the left eyeball. Somebody wisely did away with that, trimmed it. Maybe that I should have been adhering to maintaining lowered eyes and not looking around. I open with this poem from Ryokan. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of his. I hope on my next trip to Japan to kind of go to all of his sites. But it made me think of the three tenets, especially the part about bearing witness, the second tenet, bearing witness to the joys and sorrows of the world and dealing with change. You must still deal with everything ever changing, even when you say it's wonderful. I want to spend a period talking about the three tenets, even though most of us are very familiar with them. What did Ben Conley say? He was just here doing his workshop inside the grass hut. He said there is no repetition. Roshi had asked Dokai, Faith Mind, and I to do talks during this session. And we agreed to kind of loosely have it connect with the three tenets. And I will give sort of an overview and how they've manifested in my life. And then they will also allude to them in their talk. So we have somewhat of a common theme. We all know them, right? Even though the first is not knowing. Not knowing, bearing witness, taking action. And to expand, not knowing, by giving up fixed ideas about ourselves and the universe. Bearing witness to the joys and suffering of the world. Taking action from not knowing and bearing witness. These come from, as most of us know, from Roshi Bernie Glassman. Who was Roshi's teacher, one of Roshi's teachers. Maizumi Roshi's first Dharma era. And he worked these up out of the three pure precepts. And they became the three core tenets that we use. And of course, the 3 pure precepts come from our 16 bodhisattva precepts. Of course, the 3 treasures, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and then these 3 pure precepts. Cease from evil, do good for others. And the 10 great precepts, which I won't list. Now, I personally kind of struggled with that connection. As I understand it, he's kind of pulling away from making the connection. But his work, Infinite Circle, that I read some years ago, made it clear. He stated that's where they came from. Cease from evil. Dogen, the founder of the Soto sect, one of the founders, says, this is the abiding place of laws and rules of all Buddhas. This is the abiding place of laws and rules. This is the very source of laws and rules. And then Roshi Burney talks about it being a state of non-duality, a state of not knowing, which is where this comes from, and non-separation. But he admits this abiding place, this state of being, of not knowing, is a very difficult place to be in. Because we're giving up fixed ideas about ourselves and others. And that's tough. Tough for us to do. I liken it to beginner's mind. We use that phrase. Just like when you come to a new country that you've never visited before, maybe haven't read a lot about, and you're exposed to all of this without a lot of conditioning. You're just taking it in. You're aware. I've really tied this into relationships. And I know that this giving up fixed ideas about ourselves, and he says the universe, but also says about ourselves and others, that it takes some work to really see as is. And in our relationships, that's not so easy. One with the other, between you and me, between you and your significant other, between me and my wife Carla, between me and Udo. Because I believe we have an image of a person. And it's our fixed idea of them. And of course this is based on conditioning and a repetitive interplay with somebody, sometimes for years. And you get a mold cast. And you start dealing from that mold. And I think it's because it's easier for us to deal with than being really, truly aware when you're with somebody. It's easier to just say, oh, that's the way Udo's always been. It's not going to ever change. Probably a fully awakened person would think otherwise, that it's easier just to see things as they are, without carrying around all of our baggage and attachments. But I don't know how many of us really live that way. And I venture to say it's probably a reason that we have so many relationship challenges. We live having an idea about maybe what my spouse is like, relating to that idea, and 15 to 20 years down the road, you wake up next to somebody and realize that's not the same person. They don't even know them. And I don't mean just physical wise, because obviously everybody ages. Again, Ryokan said you must still deal with everything ever changing. Just that is what the person was before and what we latch on to. But they've become just this, the person I don't really even know. Hey, I wanted just that, not just this. Projections are kind of the same way. I have a colleague of mine who's also a hospice chaplain, Berkeley. And Berkeley was working with a family whose dad was dying. And this guy was a mean SOB. He had been an SOB his entire life. And as he was about to leave this life, he wasn't changing. But they, the family, wanted a good death. They wanted to have a change and see dear old dad alter his condition. And you know what Berkeley told them, and I love his line. He said, you know, it's just about being okay with things not being okay. We have to challenge ourselves, I think, to overturn our stories, our beliefs, our cherished beliefs. Another little incident that happened, it's not heavy, but it makes a point. I have another patient, a hospice patient, whose daughter, Kai, lives in Oxford, England. And she visits her mom and helps with the caregiving on occasion. But she lives in Oxford, England. The husband is a professor at Oxford and teaches there. And they're both evangelical Christians doing work all over the world. Recently, the husband was in a symposium in South America dealing with human trafficking. So they travel quite a bit. Kai was in Indonesia. She was at a noodle shop ordering noodles with chicken. She's not vegan. So as they're serving this, she sees behind the counter, she sees this server pouring the noodles and then beginning to pick pieces of fat off the chicken. No meat, taking the fat. Well, Kai's getting pretty upset. He says, this is, I must be the ugly American. She's kind of ticked off, saying they're kind of taking advantage of me. I'm getting the crap. The worst part of the chicken. She wanted to say something, but being a good Christian and being in a foreign country, she opted not to. So she sat there stewing as she ate her soup, noodles, and fat. And the owner of the shop came by. And he said, looked at her bowl, and she said, oh, the cook has really honored you. That's the best part of the chicken. And it's a delicacy in their country. Complete shift. Do good. Dogen Zenji says, this is the Dharma of Samyak Sambodhi, supreme enlightenment. This is the way of all beings. Roshi Burney talked about the sixth patriarch. he defined practice as the state of mind in which there is no separation between subject and object, no space between I and thou, you and me, up and down, right or wrong. And Roshi Burney calls this bearing witness. He said, anything we do without separation or denial, driving a car, cooking breakfast, taking out the garbage, is practice or bearing witness. Everything. Of course, he went on to create some pretty dramatic venues for bearing witness all over the world. And it calls for us to be present with the joy and suffering, just as it is. No judgments, no attachments. And many of us are familiar with the street retreats that he's done. His bearing witness retreat in Auschwitz-Birkenau, I think, will be in its 20th year next November. I'm hoping to make that trip. A number of folks here, including Roshi, went on the Rwanda retreat just last year or this year. And next year he's doing a Native American witness retreat, which will deal with the plight of Native Americans in this country, in South Dakota. But we all have opportunities to bear witness. One that was particularly moving to me recently was with my own hospice company, Wilshire Hospice, where I work. And every year they have a memorial where the families all get together that have lost loved ones during the course of the year and have a wonderful ceremony. They take these heart rocks. Every table has a pile of heart rocks, and they're not exactly hearts, but they look close enough to be called a heart rock. And the names of the loved ones are called out one by one. I know on the bearing witness retreats they do this in the concentration camps of those that have died. And I'm a professional. I did the invocation at this, so I'm supposed to be pretty stoic until I hear the name of somebody that had passed that I had been with and had spent months, sometimes years with. And the tears just started flowing. Pretty powerful. The third, pure precept. Do good for others. This one's a little easier to make that connection with Roshi Burney. Dogen Zenji says, this is to transcend the profane and to be beyond the holy. This is to liberate oneself and others. Roshi Burney talks of having this overpowering experience of feeling the hungry spirits. And he took a vow at that time. And of course that became his right action. He made a vow to feed them. And his life has really been driven by that. And this follows naturally with our own commitments as Buddhists to free others and ourselves from suffering. And isn't that the baseline? Ending suffering? That's core Buddhism. It's what Shakyamuni set out to do so long ago. And Roshi Burney has gone to do so much good for so many. I got the opportunity to visit some of the work that he had done, the Grayston Foundation, Roshi, Dokai, Faith Mine, Ocean, were there in May, I think it was. And it's just pretty miraculous what he started. And we've heard a lot about that. Our Roshi, in a recent article, talked about 1994 that Roshi Glassman had created a koan for himself. What should I do next to work with people that are being rejected by society, in particular AIDS, homelessness, and poverty? And he set out to find a place to bear witness to his koan and started his street retreats. What is appropriate action? What do we do? What do I do? What do you do? Roshi Bernie makes it kind of sound easy. He says, well, when you come from a place of not knowing and bearing witness, right action arises on its own. He says, of itself, the fruit is born. But I go back to what he said earlier about it being kind of tough to be in not knowing, to get there. Why is it so difficult? Well, we've broken that link to not knowing and instead hang on to fixed ideas. We separate ourselves from all of that out there. It's not always easy work. It can be very overwhelming. But part of that ties into Siddhartha's story. He was kept isolated, not allowed to see sickness, old age, and death. And all hell broke loose when he did. Not dealing with what arises and the suffering can be pretty painful. We kind of look the other way. And then when you turn around, you're staring up at the half dome of suffering. You know, Half Dome, Yosemite, 4,700 feet. When you're at the base of that thing looking up, it's pretty formidable. So how do we get up that? Well, maybe I'm dating myself here. I climbed, but it was in another era. But you got the first handhold, then the first foothold, place the first piton, put your carabiner in, and put the rope, and up you went, one step at a time. I find it amazing. Roshi Bernie's vision, he did his initial work right here, in this room, on these grounds. Doing the same thing we're doing here this week. I just find that amazing. From humble beginnings, from Zazen. Another great story is from the Chutsi Chi Foundation, Master Cheng Yang. Remember they came and visited us here? It's incredible what she has done and their organization. They began with their motto of instructing the rich and saving the poor. And she has the Midas touch to bring funds in. So she's got 10 million members, chapters in 47 countries. And you know how they started? 30 housewives just donating a little money from their grocery money each week. And look what she did. This serving others is a pretty common theme throughout Buddhism. Many of us think of the old Buddhists as being the hermits and monastics, but all the way back Shantideva's time, if you're familiar with the way of the Bodhisattva, he was an 8th century sage. We're reading his book right now at the California Men's Colony, reading it out loud, every line, along with Pema Chodron's commentary. And you're supposed to do it that way, they say, because the sound can drift out and affect others, the birds, the rabbits. In this case, we're hoping the guards. But Shantideva wrote bodhicitta, and bodhicitta is obviously connected with bodhisattva, Sanskrit word. It's awakened heart or mind. The relative bodhicitta, we're very used to relative and absolute. The relative bodhicitta is our aspiration and perseverance to become awakened so that we can be of benefit to all suffering beings. Absolute bodhicitta is our awakened mind, free from concepts, that sees the emptiness of all phenomena. Shantideva writes, bodhicitta, in intention, bears rich fruit for those still wandering in samsara. And yet, a ceaseless stream of merit does not flow from it. For this will rise alone from active bodhicitta. And that ties into this action, that we go out and do something. Interestingly, throughout that book, they always talk about the importance of solitude and meditation coupled with action. Doesn't that smack of what Roshi was talking about last night? Zazen, hyphen, and, hyphen, action. I have enough for 3 talks. I always do this. So I'll save the rest for another talk because we're at the close. One thing, I have some great hospice stories that I wanted to share, but another time. We're supposed to be talking about the joys and sorrows of the world. I've been kind of talking about the downside, and most of my hospice stories were kind of a little bit down. But there is really a joyous side to all of this. Just being there, even when it's with a dying person. Just this. And there's this lady named Laura Kim Joyner who is doing a blog. And what she's done is taking a Mary Oliver poem each day. And she does a little blog, a journal on it. She's a certified trainer in nonviolent communication and a veterinarian specializing in avian conservation medicine, mostly in Central America. Go figure. Her goal to foster compassionate communication in our communities of mixed species so that all beings may flourish. The poem she picked one day was called Just Rain. I've used the word just a lot tonight. And I like that, just rain, because we just had some rain, which was wonderful, and I think we've got a few more days from at least some rain coming. Mary wrote, "The clouds did not say soon, but who can tell for sure? It wasn't the first time I had been fooled." The sky doors opened and the rain began to fall on all of us. And then the birds joined in, and I too felt called toward such throat praise. Well, the whole afternoon went that way until I thought I could feel the almost born things in the earth rejoicing. As for myself, I just kept walking, thinking, once more, I am grateful to be present. And the blog that was written was also beautiful. How many times today will I say, just? When I see the sun's light move the owl in the leaves into focus. It's just the early morning light that is a prayer. When my son awakes and trudges towards the coffee machine. It's just a young man. Miracle of birth and circumstance. And, yes, just love. When my spouse sings hymns in the shower. It's just a man who loves so much that he'll give his life just for me. And, yes, just for you. When I write these words, they're just me aching to be present, just for today, just for the next moment. And she ends with a question. Is there anything you take for granted or which you would like to sing praise for today?